Hi everyone, welcome back. So this is episode 3 of the Participatory Ponderments for the virtual exhibition Modern Fatigue. And today I have my guest over here, Ethan. Hi. So you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm a Year 3 Geography major and I minor in Art History. And I also play hockey for the national team.
Okay.
And I play hockey quite often. And my hobbies include like sports, like running. And I also have a hobby in like fish keeping. Yeah, I keep aquariums and
Okay.
yeah, I'm an aquarium hobbyist.
Okay.
So that's my way of de-stressing.
Oh, nice. Oh, okay, that's really cool. So didn't know about that. So actually, me and Ethan, we are classmates in one of the art history classes that ended recently, right? So it was a course on like methods and theories of art history. So it's nice that we meet each other there, and I'm so grateful that you come on today's show to share a little bit more.
Thanks for thinking so highly of me and thinking that I am worthy of coming here.
You are okay. So now we can talk a little bit more. So I'm quite curious to hear from you, right? Like what's your take on like the modern fatigue, right? How do you conceptualize, how do you conceive of this sort of fatigue in your own lifespans?
For me, I think the modern fatigue is, like as everyone knows, is both a mental and also a physical phenomenon where everybody is just feeling so tired and like they are feeling like a slave in like in their own emotions and in the world. So I thought of it as really something that is not just mental but it's also social, technological, and also environmental, meaning as which it depends on what social networks they are in, what like kind of technology that they use in their life, or also what environmental factors lah. So, and how I see it is basically over-accumulation of work, of emotions, of experiences and objects. So like we are so driven to accumulate objects in terms of like material wealth, like money and all that, and also nowadays it's more about experiences, accumulating experiences. So like you want to go and try this, like just try this out because everybody else is like also like doing those things, and then emotions is really like quite easy to say lah. Like you just want to feel happy, you want to feel these emotions. Like one thing that I just thought is like the movie, the How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies, right? So it became less about the movie but more about the experience and emotion of you're gonna go there and cry, you know, and like you're all about accumulating and hearing what other people are accumulating. And it's also about accumulation of different identities. Like you want to be able to navigate different situations. So like maybe family, you are something, you are different. Maybe with a certain group of friends, you are different. So it's more of like a flex, or like something to be proud of, that you have different identities with different people. So all this over-accumulation leads to a modern fatigue.
I see. So I think it's really interesting that you talk about having many different identities, because I feel like one way we can put it is how like a lot of modern life today is about being very performative, right? Performing different roles in different contexts, right? And I think also like it's interesting that you use the framework of like accumulation to talk about fatigue. Because I think one way that I think other philosophers, for example, have shared about the idea of the modern fatigue is that they believe that there's a sort of oversaturation of like media content, of like material goods, like wealth and resources, right? Too much of it oversaturates you to the point where you become tired and numb of that sort. So it's really nice that you bring in this perspective. It's really interesting. So is there anything else you want to share about what do you think it's
I guess a lot of people would say that it's a problem, right? Do you consider it an issue, right?
I think it is an interesting issue.
But I thought of it on the other perspective that actually this is not a new phenomenon in fact. That this has just been a constant evolution of this feeling of fatigue that perhaps began since the Industrial Revolution, like when we really began to switch towards a more modern life. And back then I'm sure that there was this form of fatigue. I don't think there's much like literature on it, but I'm sure that back then they did feel some form of modern fatigue in comparison to the agrarian life perhaps. And then perhaps even from like maybe 50 years ago towards transition towards a technological world, there was also probably fatigue, just as how we are now from a technological world like moving towards a digital and like social media world. So there will always be this fatigue. Yeah, because I think we as humans, we are unable to like control ourselves. Like, we lack discipline as a species, and we are always attracted to new things, and you know, like you see, like compared with animals, they just go with their way of life. You know, even there's an abundance or shortage, they just it's just in them to know how to like live without wanting more from others or something. You know, yeah. So that's something that I think could be a flaw in the human. Yeah, and I thought of it as a vicious cycle where the more we want to accumulate to get rid of this fatigue, the more we find it even more tiring. You know, like to beat the thing, we have to go travel, and then there'll always be a next place to travel. You know, there'll be a new thing to do, or like hobbies. You know, like maybe you pick up like some form of exercise, then you want to become good at it, you need to purchase the equipment, the training, the time, like you spend time on YouTube or anything. So all this is just a vicious cycle of, but you'll never feel like you have enough.
I see. So you think that is like a key like distinguishing factor between humans and animals, is that animals know when to be satisfied but humans don't?
I guess so. I think from what I see, that animals, it's just an intrinsic way of being content.
Okay.
Like, of course we can't tell what they are thinking, but they don't need they just make do with what they have, you know. And we rarely see instances where they are like jealous or this kind of emotions, you know, of other animals. In the natural setting, not in terms of like when they are domesticated. When they are domesticated is different, but in the natural setting, animals are much different from us.
Okay. That's a really nice way to do that, to think of this discussion. And also like the idea of like, you say moving from the agrarian society to the more industrialized setting, right? But I was also thinking even further, I guess, to the dawn of like the agrarian society, I feel like their sort of fatigue also changes, right? From like, I think perhaps you think of like the sort of hunter-gatherers phase of human feet. Of course it is tiring to hunt a mammoth, I don't know what you're doing, but you know, it's tiring in a sense. But the agrarian life also is tiring in the sense where like you have to like constantly, you know, like plow the land, or like, you know, harvest your crops and whatever. But I think maybe the sort of difference is that I think even the discussion with Andrea, I believe the previous episode, is that she mentioned how like in the agrarian sort of lifestyle, like first you have like winter time to like chill, you have winter time to like recover and rest, right? But the thing about perhaps in a more industrialized or like a digital age now is that you always can work anytime and anywhere, which of course is a different form of exhaustion now, right? I think.
And I think also now there's a lot of focus on like happiness and like chasing your happiness, you know, choosing your own happiness, and it's a lot to do with self-exploitation and self-regulation that you introduced to me about. And actually I feel that people are disillusioned to think that happiness is entirely on the individual, when actually it's mostly governed by social forces, political forces, environmental forces that are out of our control. And this fatigue stems from our inability to like such as accept that things will be the way it is, that because like we are so hard up on trying to find this happiness, and when things don't go our way, we feel it tiring, you know, because we just can't let go to the fact that like some things are out of our control.
Wow. So it's like you said, maybe like how a lot of people are fixated on the idea of happiness as an end product, when it could be a process also.
Process based, and that is fleeting, obviously, and like nobody should be in a constant state of happiness, I feel. Like you need to have ups and downs to experience the highs and lows. When we are always frustrated or tired when we are not in control, that's quite an issue there.
I see. Then perhaps we didn't share any sort of like your own personal stories with like how do you feel about the modern fatigue? Like how do you see the modern fatigue in your own lives, for example? Like
personally, I think like I do experience it, but I take pride in the fact that I take active steps to like not experience it, in a sense like I don't have social media, I make it a point to say no to friends. So like when they ask to go out and all that, I make it a habit, make it a point sometimes to say no, and firmly say like I just need time on my own, or like I don't feel like like interacting or something. Not and because I don't want it to be I'm going for the sake of showing up for them and like to being present for them, and mentally I'm not there, or like emotionally I just want to be at home. I don't want to cheat myself nor their time. So that's what I do. And I think as a like hockey player or as a sportsman for like all my life, there are many times where I felt tired, like from the season, mentally and physically, like either you just want to win or you just want the season to end. And like I do understand that fatigue, but I think I am doing quite well in balancing that fatigue by like cross training. So during the off season I do different sports that is not related to my like, so I run and I like swim, gym, all that. Not with a goal in mind, but just to take my mind off things. I particularly think that how I combat this fatigue is by putting myself through even more fatigue. So like endurance sports and all that. So like running for long distances, swimming, because these things are like you're doing active things, but it's all in your mind. So so you can in a sense like dissociate while running. Like if you know the path, or let's say you're on a treadmill, you don't have to pay attention to where you're going out there, which gives you time to like contemplate your life, reflect. So I use that moments to think about like things. When you swim or when it gets tiring, you start to question yourself, like actually why am I doing this? You know, I can just go home or I can just stop. But when you push yourself to that, it's a bit extreme, but I don't do it in a way that I'm gonna die, but I just enjoy that calm state.
Okay, that's really nice, because I think especially the point where you say about how like you don't want to go out with your friends if you don't want to, right? And I think it's nice that you don't only think it from a more personal point of view of like, because I'm tired, I need time for myself, but also about respecting their time and not making a very sort of like forced kind of interactions with them, right? That's not really the best sort of interactions. And I think it's really nice that you actually mentioned how like I think it's not along the way when we were talking on the bus just now, because you were telling me about how like I was sharing with you that I feel quite tired most of the time. Like sometimes after school, even though I wanted to go for like a run, for example, but I'm just too tired to do it. And you mentioned about how having a sort of a very, I guess, a somewhat disciplined kind of schedule and a way to condition your body, and having exercising regularly, ironically makes you feel less tired than not exercising that much, which I think is very important, because I think the idea of like the mental health, right? We always talk a lot about mental health and sort of burnout. I think a lot of it ties to physical health also. Like having a good physical like health does affect, you provide a better mental health.
I think there are many tools online. Like I listen to other podcasts on health also to help me like come up with like routines that would help me like ironically be more productive lah. So, but I feel good about it, and I think this discipline is very important. Like it doesn't have to be like the David Goggins kind of, David Goggins, right? Not that kind of discipline, but just basic discipline and like self-pride in like what you do. And I read somewhere like when you're disciplined, you are not a slave to your emotions. So like when you lack discipline, you are just a slave to how you feel at that point in time. So this could be a transition towards like how social media, like they are designed, like TikTok, Instagram, the algorithms are designed for you to be a slave to those emotions. Like where you are like doom scrolling, you just like use your phone, and you just, because you have no discipline or like lack of, you just let yours give into the feeling of you want to know what's the next reel there. And I think overall this would lead to something called a functional freeze state.
Functional freeze. Freeze or free? Freeze.
So like you're in a mental paralysis where there's so much overstimulation where you don't feel anything, and like you don't feel like doing anything. So like you procrastinate and therefore like you're always behind time, mental fatigue, and like it takes so much energy to just do the little things. So like maybe you just get up and like fold your blanket, or like go wash your clothes, or wash your plates. It takes so much energy away from like your doom scrolling, and so a lot of the time people find themselves like going through the motion of things, like to school. You are disconnected from not only the world but also yourself.
I see. I feel like I'm definitely guilty of that. Sometimes, I think especially when the semester gets tough, I have the tendency to just scroll and like rather do nothing. But I feel like it's nice actually like how we can reframe discipline in the sense where like if you are not disciplined, you're a slave to your own emotions, to your scrolling and stuff. But I think it's something I've never thought of before. I've never thought of discipline in that way. So that's very fresh insight.
I think because people think of it as like negative, like you have to be like in army and like very disciplined, and yes, that works for some people, but if it doesn't work for you, it's just the small things lah.
Okay, wow, that is very insightful. Really cool.
Back to the idea of endless accumulation, like how social media fits into that, about like just the algorithms these days are designed for us to see things that we like, so you just want to consume and accumulate. And also they like when let's say we're watching a video, a product comes up to link to the thing that you want to buy, to like, entice you to accumulate it, and like you're always comparing with others, like let's say other content creators or like other ways. There's this subconscious endless comparison, and which leads to also like you're constantly compartmentalizing things in your brain. So like how you said, like when you go to the exhibition, you are thinking of ways to pull it into your your ideas and all that. So you're no longer just present in the moment, but you're compartmentalizing this. So maybe you see some reel that gives you inspiration, or like maybe for me, I see this like exercise routine that I want to compartmentalize into my routine, and then so we are always compartmentalizing things so much in our brain that it's tiring. So like there's always the thought like, okay, I'm gonna do this during holidays. Or, I'm gonna do this during weekend. Then we are just keep compartmentalizing stuff. There's always like we want to back to the accumulating identities also, about how we find it cool to have a social self and also a home self. Like at home you want to act differently, and at outside you're different. And then this, I think that like it's an internal conflict with the social needs and wants and expectations versus what you want, your internal wants. Like you can't act the way you want to act in public. Like, I think that's the way most people think. It's not a given law or anything, but it shouldn't be that way. But like people find this conflict between their social self and their home's private self, and therefore this conflict creates a sort of like constant struggle that contributes to the fatigue.
I see. It's a sort of constant readjustment of identities in different contexts, right? That's what forms the fatigue. And it's really nice to bring in compartmentalization. Like what you said is really true, because like when I was like creating this virtual exhibition, of course I was like have my own hidden bias, right? I guess also a sort of confirmation bias, if you put it that way, of like looking for things that speaks to yourself in that very compartmentalized way, which of course takes away from the idea of living in the present, which is definitely a sort of strategy, right, to be able to combat the sort of modern fatigue. And I think it kind of brings in the idea that I believe one of the readings of our mods where Professor like Mark Bradley, our professor, he actually interviewed another art historian, Weng-Choy. It's the idea of like the anecdotal approach, right? About how like I remember vividly one of the paragraphs mentioned about how like one of the mistakes that a lot of curators make is that when you create an exhibition, you would kind of choose works to speak to a theme, but you don't let the artworks speak for themselves, right? And I think that as someone like me, I guess, a student curator making this exhibition, I'm aware of this, but I don't really know also a way to maneuver around of like preventing this sort of confirmation bias. But I think something as art history students, it's always nice to think about something like this. A bit diverted from modern fatigue, but that is something that I guess that's a methodology of looking at art history, right? There's definitely a concern. But it's hard to find an answer to it. I don't really think I have a solution to that also.
I'm still working on it.
It was nice to conclude the section where we're talking about our understandings, our interactions and relationships with the modern fatigue. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the artworks they have chosen. So were there any artworks that really spoke to you? Maybe the collection of books.
The title, the first one that I really liked was titled Bliss at the Cliff's Edge by Shepard Fairey, that was made this year, 2024. So I really liked how like from the title itself, it was titled Cliffs, right? So I really liked the precarity of it. It's almost like a tipping point. Of that represents not just the world that we are in, but also our mental state of like fatigue, where we are constantly on the brink of collapse, I feel.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the distance, obviously, we can see that it's the oil rig, which to me was a symbol of modernity and endless consumption and accumulation. Because we are just constantly drilling into the ocean for fossil fuels and all that. And this ties in with how natural exploitation is just as important as individual exploitation. Like we care so much about natural exploitation, but we don't really focus on how we exploit ourselves, how to do things, to all that. And like these two guests, they are resting in nature at the cliff's edge, but they are confronted by the inescapable reality of like their view, which is the oil rig. You know, you can't escape it, even though you are trying to rest. Like no matter how hard we all try to step away, but we can't. The reality is that we are always stuck in a world of the world that we live in. It led me to think about whether is there really such thing as true bliss and respite. How can we feel bliss without feeling guilt in today's world? Like if you look out at the ocean, like how do you not feel guilty about it when you are looking at it? And sometimes I had another thought about how for these two people, going to the beach sometimes is more about telling others that you can afford to go, or like you have the time to go, rather than actually going there to distress. You feel happier about telling others that you are there rather than being there itself. So you are trying hard to preserve the idea through pictures, through like dressing up nicely, rather than actually being in the present. So this is what spoke to me about this artwork.
I think it's really interesting because actually, I think previously in the previous episode, like me and Adrian, we talked about this work also. But I think we have a pretty different interpretation from you, because ours, we really look at the idea of like the climate crisis. How we imagine this is that we imagine that how like because of very horrible like climate change, global warming, right? That this is the only remaining plot of land in the world. Everything else has been submerged under the sea. And I think your interpretation of it does tie in with Steuart's painting also, actually, about the inescapability of modernity and urbanization. Because you see, even though these workers are like resting and chilling, the factories that they're supposedly working is in the background, reminding them that, oh, you know, this is where you belong. Right? And I think it's nice because I think like what really interests me is the idea of how the cliff is a sort of like a very dangerous site, right? It's like, you know, at the sort of at the edge of literally falling over. You might fall over any time. And yeah, I just really like your interpretation of it, of also how like the idea of like going to the beach as a way to show that, oh, I can afford to go on vacation, I can afford to, you know, live such a good life, which actually brings in the idea of this philosopher, Guy Debord. He actually mentioned, his book is titled The Society of the Spectacle, where like this society, we don't really focus on the actual experiences anymore, but we focus on the spectacle, as in the sort of the image that we present to people, right? So like for example, like owning a branded bag, for example, like people no longer feel the sort of joy from having their physical object itself, but they derive joy from the image that they can project onto other people with this object, which is, I guess, a new way of self-identity also in today's context, which I think it's nice that you bring in this discussion through this painting.
It's sort of like nothing is valuable, nothing is memorable if nobody else sees it. You know, there's like that idea, you know, like you can't enjoy something for yourself, but its value is based on how others see it.
How others see it,
Or rather also yourself, like you don't value yourself, but it's based on how others see you. So you go out and do things and achieve things based on to get people to see you when you don't actually find joy in what you're doing.
It's like you value your spectators more than you value yourself. It's like,
and of course that is a never-ending cycle of like you can't please anyone, and like you will definitely feel fatigue from that.
That's great. I really love this interpretation of this work.
And then I also picked another one,
Family Home in Tonkin.
By Lefebvre, which is in 1929, and I really saw it as where they are lying on the porch. I thought of it as a liminal space, which I just learned about in my own geography module. How this is in a state of transition, where it's neither inside the home, and it's neither like outside the home. So this is it's a middle space, like gray area between the home and the outside world. And they're just being there, like lying down and relaxing. I think he's reading a book, right?
Yeah,
one is reading a book. This guy, he's also reading a book or something.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice.
Something, right?
So both of them were reading.
Two of them are reading a book, and then a child and a woman is just like staring off into the just zoning out. So the fact that they are neither that they could have done this at home, like inside the home, but the fact that they want to be in this liminal space, somewhat safety and privateness, but yet not completely secluded because they want to be exposed to the outdoor air or something, perhaps, right? So, and I thought more of this as their bodies, they are being rather than doing something. They are just being there, being in that place, rather than doing something in that space that is as of any meaning. And I also thought about nature, how the plants, like these plants are the way they control nature. That these are curated pots and gardens in the background, that there's still some sort of control, maintain order and like nature in their life, but without letting it being overrun. Through like by putting in all these pots and all, which I think is a very like you can't it's a reminder that you can't escape it, that we are always trying to be in control. Even back then, which is 100 years ago, there was this concept of just being in control. And I know how you said like this painting was a resistance to something, to colonial, was it?
Okay, I will elaborate more on that. I think I'm not so sure exactly if it is a resistance per se, but I think based on my understanding, so actually this was also from a reading in our module also, right? So it is by Phoebe Scott, one of the curators at National Gallery Singapore, and I'm not sure whether it was this in her text or was it as part of our class discussion, right? When we talk about how, because this work is also by Le Faux, this work is like in a sense sent to Paris to exhibit, right? It's a sort of like an example of Vietnamese artwork, and they don't see the Vietnamese as equals. Back then they see them as their colonial subjects, right? So it is also as how Le Faux as an artist, he's in a very special position of like, I have access to the Parisian market, but at the same time I have the identity of a more inferior Vietnamese subject, right? Obviously. So how does he make sense and navigate like this space? It's quite ironic because like obviously you wouldn't want to present your own subjects, your own painted Vietnamese subjects, as people inferior to the Parisians. So because when I was thinking of like resistance, I was thinking of like how, for example, one example is perhaps Gerguan, one of the impressionist artists. I'm not impressionist, a modern artist who went to Tahiti, right? Went to like some island, and then he kind of paint this very sort of like eroticized image of like women in more like in a sort of islandic setting. And I was thinking of how like Le Faux, he didn't present the Vietnamese subjects as people of completely like subordinate, or completely like docile, completely like giving themselves to authority and power. They show that they exert their own sort of power. Like they're not smiling. Even the way that they're presented is very dignified, right? We see like they're fully clothed. They are living their own lives. They are not responding or catering to the gaze of the audiences, which I think, in a sense, is a very subtle form of resistance to the Parisian people. And it's very interesting that you brought in the idea of like liminal spaces, a space of transition, right? That's what you mean. So, because I think this idea of liminality is further heightened through like the composition of this work. We see a lot of outdoor, sort of like a front courtyard space, right? And then this liminal, I don't know, like a corridor, front porch area, right? And I think it's also really cool how you bring in the idea of like potted plants as a symbol of control, right? Because I was thinking of the idea of colonial control of the subjects, and these people, they control over plants. Like, is it like in human nature for us to want to control things?
I think so. I mean, my way, I think the way I do my fish keeping hobby, it's a control world that I have power to decide and like design, curate, and take care of. So it's my way of like my distressing area, and like seeing the fishes move and like interact is something very relaxing. But it brings me peace that I created this entire thing.
I see.
So I get it. I think as humans, we are always looking for control. We either want to control or be controlled.
Like,
like we don't like being in a like nothing state. And let's see like TikTok, this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
So we are neither controlled nor in control.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So, would you say that in that case, liminal spaces are important in promoting an environment of like establishing control of sorts? I don't know. Is this?
I think just liminal spaces are like metaphorical and physical spaces of change,
Okay.
where we are not subject to consequences or like boundaries of what we used to be or what we want to be. So we are in that exploratory state. So it's more like a lot, like there's some freedom to explore certain ideas, certain emotions, certain like because liminality applies to a lot of things. Like it could be physical or it could be just like a metaphorical state.
Okay. Yeah, and it's really nice that you use the sort of liminal space framework to talk about this, because when I was looking at this in the idea of the modern fatigue virtual exhibition, right, is that I wanted to use this as a sort of turning point in terms of art historical time frame also, of like moving from a more colonial era into a sort of more post-colonial modern contemporary era of art. So yeah, for me it was a more of a macro look at it, and for you provided a more, I guess, individual level of like interacting in spaces. So that was a nice way to discuss. Are there any perhaps one more work that
I actually have one work that I looked at myself.
Okay.
Yeah, it's titled Tornado over Kansas, 1929 on oil. So as you can see, like maybe you can upload this for them to see, but it's just like a farming family running away from the tornado.
Okay.
So I guess what it doesn't really fit to what your artworks, but this really felt I was moved by it because at the end of the day, no matter what we are, I felt that we are at the hands of nature in terms of like we have all this power and control over the social world, technological world, but we can't do anything when like a tsunami happens or earthquake happens. We are all just the same. And even 100 years ago, these were the worries. Even in their supposedly idealized state of like not modernity or anything. But they are already in this state of on their own and like taking care of their lives, but yet they are still subject to this kind of stress. And I saw the tornado as something of like a inner turmoil that disrupts whatever peace that we have in our mind. Like this modern fatigue, it's like a tornado that threatens to disrupt everything that internally and externally as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. I was thinking of the idea of how like you mentioned about idea of accumulation, right, as a root cause of like the modern fatigue. But I was thinking of like how your idea of, you talk about control, right? Control and accumulation. I feel like it comes hand in hand with each other. The act of that. But all this can be lost to things beyond our control, right? So how would you like make sense of it in perhaps in a more like today's context? Like, how would you see the tornado perhaps in the Singapore society? What would this tornado mean to you? Like inner turmoil, or is it a bit more than just that?
I think it could be inner turmoil, like that is based because of the fatigue, but also maybe just larger forces of society and like politics that may be a kind of tornado and disrupt our life path that we had in mind, our life goal maybe. Like maybe we don't get this job and all that, and to us we feel that there's a tornado that like destroyed everything in our path and we have to rebuild again. So these kind of things would just threaten our over-accumulation. Like what's the point of, let's say, accumulating internships and all that when like something happens down the road and then you can't do it, like just it could be even like something actual physical that like affects your own body or your own health, that maybe you're on that path but now you have to veer off it because of your own internal struggles of your health or something, you never know when these things might hit you.
So would you say that it is always nice to prepare for a rainy day, to like give yourself a sort of safeguard?
I think so. And I think back to like how discipline is. Like on a rainy day, like you will fall down to what you have built up, which is your habits and routines. So like no matter what, if you have a strong foundation in terms of like your habits and all that, like maybe just like make it a habit to visit your friends or meet up once in a while, or like from just self-care, like every Sunday is a day to run.
Oh yeah.
If you fall back on these habits, even when your life is going like haywire, it gives you some form of control that is needed. Like can combat this kind of fatigue and all that, because these were the things that either make you happy or help you get into a state of reflection or anything. That you don't have to think, like maybe like you just fold your blanket, like you just automatically know how to fold your blanket, and once because these are habits that you have already like ingrained in yourself, that is not dependent on whether it's like a bad day or anything. You just fold your blanket, something like that.
I see. Like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like whatever you shared is sort of like focusing on the more things that have intrinsic value to yourself, right? Like sort of like building up habits, building up good practices that will always tide you through any storm of that sort.
Yes, because I feel like a lot of things you're not in control, but these things you are. That you can't control what happens in the outside world, but you just try to keep control of this.
Okay.
But in a like sustainable manner, not like over-accumulating and all that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I think this is a very like sort of like unexpected conclusion that we came to, because I think in my mind when I first crafted this exhibition, this conversation, is that I always think a lot about like emancipation, of sort of liberation of like structures that pull you down. But it's interesting how like even the sort of like introducing these sort of like, I would say structures, but it's sort of like discipline, which seems binding, like when you look at it on the surface level, it could perhaps provide an answer to like combating the modern fatigue of like over-accumulation, right? I think that is it's a very, very meaningful conversation that we brought up today. Never thought of it in that way before, so it's really, really cool. And I think maybe it's a good time to conclude and wrap up today's discussion. Right. So what are your some of like your thoughts after talking about these artworks, of like engaging in these conversations? Are there any things that you want to share with the viewers?
I think what we talked about so much about modern fatigue, and I think we just really have to make time to reflect on ourselves, our own lives, and like just have that space of contemplation. And I think art really helps us to do that, in terms of sometimes it gives us the inspiration, or it just somehow guides us to see certain things, and maybe it puts our rambling thoughts in our mind into a piece, just like how like literature or poems can put our thoughts into words, of how we feel into words that we can like concretize. So I think really art and artworks really help us to get into that zone, to find that space, but also making art as well. You don't have to be fancy like painters or artists, but just doing like artwork maybe on our own painting, and it's a very calming and therapeutic state that allows us to just slow down and get more in control of ourselves.
Nice. So nice art as a tool to facilitate this sort of contemplative lifestyle. Then this is a bit of a random like question, but like like more like a sportsman, an athlete, right? But do you make art, or do you consider making art in any way? Or do you see like your sport as an art form also?
I don't. For me, I don't I think some people say like, there's an art to like playing sports, art of like certain movements. But I think the way I create art is my fish tanks. I think just the way I do it. I don't spend like a lot of money on like the certain very nice aquascapes, but to me I feel like it's just a dynamic art piece, because like the fish grow, they die, the plants grow and die. It's dependent on the care that is given, like the light, the food, all that. So that in itself is a like ongoing performative, just the dynamic artwork that always changes, and if you leave it be, it may die, or it may like go down, like maybe a lot of algae builds up and all that. But what I've learned is like things always balance out in the natural state. The fish are actually stronger than we think. Like they can adapt and all that. It's just that So these are the things that I've learned through that practice.
And it's nice because, like you said, like I guess the act of observation, right, of looking at how the fishes interact with the environment, monitoring algae growth. I think it is also like a way to, you say, get into the zone, to be more contemplative in general. I think that's a really nice way to end of today's conversation. So, any last final words?
Nope. Take care of yourself.
Yes. So thank you so much, Ethan, for coming on this show. And yes, this is the end of episode 3 of this series. So thank you for watching. Bye. You can just fold anything then. Okay. So this is how materials do revise folder. Okay. So let's keep your inner child alive. So you can choose any color whatever you want.
Yeah, no pink.
Okay. I think we can fold half first. I've never fold before. I was thinking, basically we need to just make the wings come out. Like, I just don't know how to do it. I think we can fold something inwards. Yeah, something like that. Like we fold.
Wait, you don't know how to fold also?
No. I come with the idea. I didn't even. So I asked my two previous guests, they all like, wow, instantly just started following. I think you can just like, you can write something on one of the wings and then you just sign. You can write today's date also. Today's date. There. Wow. That's nice. Oh, you know this is a part of the tradition, but you don't throw your paper everything. It's true. Oh, like just throw anywhere there. Throw anywhere. Hey, he's not bad. Okay, yay. Okay, thank you so much for this. Yeah.